All right, my friends, welcome to yet another edition of the Check Engine Club, the Lucky Land Rover Club, I don't know, whatever. So we are working on a 2004 Land Rover Discovery 2. And as you can see, I've got the hood off this vehicle, or if you're from the other side of the pond, this would be called a bonnet. So my friends, we are, I think, facing the music here that we've got a head gasket issue, and that's what we're gonna tackle today. So before we do that, I wanna tell you what I've done to get us to this point where we are right now. First thing I noticed that the vehicle was overheating, and it didn't seem as though it was keeping pressure, because right here, this little nipple that comes out of the top of the radiator had cracked. So I could see fluid coming out of here, and I went ahead and replaced this radiator. I then put in a 180-degree thermostat right there, so it keeps the temperatures running a little cooler. And then just for extra measure, this pretty white new fan and the fan clutch right on the front of it. These are heavy duty. I think I got them from Dorman, but this definitely does the trick. It's way heavier duty, pushes or pulls a lot more air through than the traditional black fan that used to be on here. The black fan actually had a little chip. It was missing part of the blade. So I thought, well, good time to replace it anyway. So after bleeding the system, first of all, flushing it several times and then bleeding it with proper coolant, and several times getting that to the point where it would, I felt like there were no air bubbles. I did a vacuum bleed on it. I did all kinds of things to make sure that the coolant was completely full. After a very short period of time, I could hear that famous kind of gurgling sound in behind the passenger side glove box. You can hear, like, sounds like air, like a little waterfall, if you will, that goes in right behind this area in here. So right behind there, when you're sitting inside, you can hear it gurgling. And again, I would make sure it was completely flushed out. There was no air in any way. That was a pretty telltale sign that there was exhaust gases being pushed then into the coolant system. And the final little thing on this was, that kind of sealed it for me, was this coolant bottle right here is brand new. I noticed that it had cracked down on the other side here, but I wonder if it was due to the extreme pressure that it was getting from the exhaust gases. So it may have cracked that brittle plastic here. So interestingly, once I did get this filled up, and again, properly bled, and you run the vehicle for 30 seconds. Just, I was just remember moving it from one spot to another, 30 seconds, maybe a minute at most it was running. I came to the coolant bottle, and when I undid the lid, instantly pressure had built up. And that, for sitting for days or maybe even weeks, for it to be running for 30 seconds or a minute and to have pressure build up in here, again, just a telltale sign, head gaskets for sure. Now what I'm hoping is that it is just the head gaskets and it's not a cracked block. So I guess we're gonna find that out. We're gonna dig in here, and thanks for tuning in. Hopefully you get something out of this, but we're gonna take all the top of the engine apart here, and I'll try to document it as best I can for you as we go along. The first thing we need to do is really get the real obvious stuff out. I may not film all this because it is fairly easy, but the mass airflow sensor needs to be unplugged. And all these, the air box and everything here needs to be taken out. So these are just a flathead screwdriver on these little bits right here to undo a few of these things, the clamps, so that you can get the top end out of here. And we're actually gonna pull, we'll get to that in a little bit, but we're gonna pull all the top end stuff that we can out of here. So once we get this plastic bit out, the next thing I start to work on is the throttle cables here. So one of these is the throttle cable, and one of these is the cruise control cable. And I'm already seeing a problem right here. I didn't even notice that. This nut has been backed off and somebody didn't tighten it back up. So that's, an important thing that we'll fix later on down the road here. But we're gonna take these off and then unthread them from here. So All right, the next thing we're going to do is remove some of these vacuum lines right here at the top of the plenum. And this one is actually pretty simple to do. You would see, it seems like you just pull it this way, but actually that's not the case. You take this little red disc right around it, and once you push it this way, then it should release that tube perfectly. Looks like, again, whoever did the work on this vehicle, let's just say they maybe weren't professionals or weren't thorough. There's so many loose connections, so many things that were done haphazardly, really poorly. It's a shame. The previous owner who bought this vehicle paid a premium for this thing. It had some really interesting stickers on it that I think attracted the buyer to the vehicle, but truth be told, it was bought sight unseen, and just being honest, it was really bad shape. The poor buyer was very, very lied to, and that's a shame. So at least here at my shop, we do everything, and we are completely honest with as much as we possibly can tell you about the vehicle. We do. Can't predict the future, of course. There's no crystal ball and working on old trucks, especially Land Rovers, but you know, if there's a problem, we're going to tell you about it, or we will disclose it, or we will fix it. But anyway, disconnecting some of these lines here is pretty simple, pretty straightforward. That little hose clamp right here, that was just kind of sitting there. I didn't touch it. A lot of things were so loose on here, you could just pull them off. So that's a problem right there, because those could be vacuum leaks, and that can cause an overheating situation. So anyway, these little hoses here are just, you don't want to break anything if you can avoid it. These little hoses are all plastic, and they can get real brittle after a time period, so be real gentle with them. When you move them aside, tuck them with some care so you don't break them. And I'm really sorry, folks, I forgot to mention one important thing here in the very beginning. I'll put a little note, I think, at the beginning of the video here to remind myself when I listen to this for review, but you want to make sure that you disconnected the negative battery terminal. And what I do is I tuck it up behind this plastic wall right here. That's real important. You don't want to accidentally arc something, you know, especially around the alternator where you've got an open, you know, voltage right there. You don't want to tap anything into that. So disconnecting the battery is the very first thing you do before you remove the bonnet. All right, I think the next thing I'm going to do is get into the front of this area here. All this has to come out anyway. You're going to have to remove all the pulleys, the fan belt, etc. So I'm going to start tackling the radiator hoses and get these kind of out and off the machine here right now. And once again, apologies. I've already done a few things on this vehicle, and I forgot to document them for you so that you know exactly what to do in what order. So my apologies. I have already drained the coolant from this. There's a coolant hose down here, which it's at the bottom of the radiator on the passenger side here in the US. That once you undo that, a lot of the coolant will pretty much drop below the engine level that you'll need it to be. Typically you want it lower than the water jacket of the water pump, and if you drain it from that low pipe, it's pretty much going to drain, not all of it, but most of it, the most important stuff anyway. It'll still be coolant in the block itself, but that's okay. We're not going to need to drain all that out. So before you release any of these, obviously you don't want the engine to have been run. There's a lot of pressure here. Obviously it's very hot liquid, so be careful, be safe. If you think there is any residual coolant, definitely wear some safety glasses and gloves if that's your thing. So anyway, I've released the clamps on these. I'm going to just basically, you give these a little twist like that, and then they should come right off. Okay, got some of those hoses out of the way. We're going to take the fan off next. You need a 36mm wrench. I like this one. Some of them are real thin. This one is a thicker one. It really tends to grip that nut down here where we need to get to it. So basically it goes down behind the fan and here. Once you latch it on there, you're going to give it a good crank counterclockwise with a hammer. And I knew that would come right off because I just put this fan on, and I always feel like the world would be a better place if we would reinstall things with some anti-seize where appropriate. So one of these fans having anti-seize on it, the next mechanic who goes to work on it will thank you. And one other tip before you remove the fan, it's always a really good idea to get some cardboard between the fan and the radiator. And what that does is really protects your radiator. Now, this is a brand new radiator, and I can tell you from firsthand experience that this is a really important thing to do, because when you undo this fan, sometimes you're not expecting it. It can fall off and go towards and into the back of the radiator. I'm telling you that the littlest bump on these radiators will break them. And then you'll have a hole, and then you got to replace the whole radiator. In my case, I know this from firsthand experience because I nicked it when I was putting one in, this very one in, right before this one. So this is radiator number 3 that I myself just accidentally bumped it very gently, and that was all it took to ruin it. So we're going to put this piece of cardboard in here. I just happen to have one that's cut round, and it fits down in here perfectly, and that protects the protects it nicely, so that way nothing bumps into it in the process of your work. And I apologize if the birds are annoying. So it is such a luxury to be able to work out in the driveway. I have this positioned in such a way that if it rains or something happens, I can push the vehicle in from behind. So I apologize if the birds are annoying, but this is great with all the daylight, and being able to work out here is awesome with the weather finally warming up here at the end of May 2025 here in Western Pennsylvania. What a luxury. Okay, next we're going to get to is a couple of these pulleys. And again, I might be doing some things out of order if you've seen some of these videos online. It doesn't totally matter, but what I wanted to do is before you release the tension on the serpentine belt, which is by this right here, when you move this way, I'll show you that in a little bit. I always like to get a few of these things loosened. Particularly, you need to loosen these 3, I think these are 10 millimeter nuts. And it's nice to have the tension on this while you're just loosening them. You're not going to take this thing off just yet, but to get the tension off these these loose while the tension is on it is a little helpful. So I may do that. Memory serves, I think I need to do the same with the power steering pump too, because there's a couple of bolts behind here I think we need to get to. It's really not that big of a deal to take this on and off, so I'm going to just loosen them. If memory serves, I don't think I need to remove it, but I'm going to just be safe and do just that. All right, next I'm going to undo some more of these hose clamps here and down for the thermostat. I'll get these undone since I know they basically all need to come out anyway. And the water pump looks relatively new on this. Looks like somebody had done this work, so I'm thinking may just leave that alone for now, but we will assess that as we go along. So we're going to get these coolant hoses out of the way. Okay, some of these hose clamps can be a little tricky. There is a special hose clamp tool that can pinch these together nicely. I don't own that, but I do own a couple pair of vice grips, and they tend to do the job. One thing though, when the hose has been on for a while, it's helpful to have a tool something like this. Doesn't need to be this, but this is basically a metal right angle needle nose plier. And what I do is I just take it and get it up underneath gently so you don't pierce the hose, but once you get it in under the hose and between the pipe, you just kind of work it around the perimeter, and that really allows the pipe to come off, because sometimes they can get seized on there just from being on from years and years and years. They'll stick, and so getting this up under there allows that pipe to come off a little easier. So hopefully that helps. Okay, next thing we're going to do now, we have some clearance. We're going to take the serpentine belt off, and it's good if you take a picture of this before you take it off, just because when you put it back on, you'll have that reference point. I have it memorized, so I've done these so many times that I got it kind of nailed down, but it is important to get it back on the exact way it came off, or at least if you suspect there's a problem, double check online. There's some helpful forums and that'll show you the exact diagram of how this goes back on. But to release the tension is right here on this pulley right here. You need a 15mm socket, and ideally having a breaker bar like this. It's a 2-foot long breaker bar, and that goes, the socket goes right on there. So once you get the tension off the belt, you just simply put the breaker bar on there, and you're going to push towards the driver's side of the car, and that loosens it up. You can see right there, this now is loose, and that allows you to just really take it off. I like to take it right off the top of the alternator, and there's not a lot of room to do it, but once you get the tension off, there you go. I'll just let that go back gently. I don't want it to snap back, and job done for that part. And a good time now to really inspect the belt. So what we're going to do is look closely here. See any cracks as you bend it the opposite way, like so the ribs are facing you. If you see cracks in there, probably not a bad idea to replace it. This one actually looks pretty good, pretty new. I don't see any indication that it's in bad shape, so we're going to just keep this one, reinstall it back in. It looks like it's pretty good. All right, next thing we're going to do is test these pulleys out. So the ones that are free spinning, like this one here, this plastic one, you just want to make sure that it does spin. Not a lot of noise from it. Has some noise, but if you hear a lot of noise or it doesn't spin freely, then you want to definitely replace these. These are common to fail, especially this plastic one wears out. I've seen these go many times. And then there's a third one here. And again, they all spin pretty freely, so we're gonna keep those in place. Oh yeah, forgot, really important one here is the water pump. So again, spins pretty freely. I don't expect it to go and spin forever, of course, but you know, it feels good. I don't feel any, well, the only play I feel is because I loosened these bolts, but you know, otherwise I don't feel any play in the bearing inside of the water pump. So this does look pretty new. Clearly somebody has done some work on this. You know, I don't know how long ago, but you can see that there's just not factory in there, and that's common for a vehicle of this age to have a water pump replaced. All right, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to remove the air conditioning compressor, and that is these 4 bolts right here, here, back there, and here. I've had these break. I don't know why, but they do tend to come out, and they aren't easy sometimes. So before we go any further, I'm going to spray some penetrating oil down in here, WD-40 or you know, whatever you've got to spray down in. So not up at the top here, but actually down here will hopefully allow it to seep into the threads and allow these to come out. You don't want to break one of these off, because then you got to replace this whole carrier or drill it out and go through that whole process. So what I try to do is get a hose down in here with like I said, the penetrating oil as best you can. For whatever reason, this one seems to be the stickiest on all of them I've ever worked on. So just be aware that these can be, they can fight you a little bit. This is a 10mm head. Do not use a drill machine on this. Use your hand, feel. If it's giving you a lot of tension, just be patient, wait, spray it down some more. If you have to come back the next day and let it soak in, just, you know, feel these out. Don't snap them off in there. It is a nightmare to fix, and then if not, you got to replace that whole thing. So ideally what we're going to do is remove these 4 bolts. Hopefully they come right off. You do not need to remove the air conditioning connections themselves. So right here, these just stay intact. We're going to unplug this here and these 4 bolts, and then really what should happen is this will come straight up, and then it's going to go right into its home, which is right here. We're going to just allow it to sit right in the air conditioning, or the air intake box. This is where the air filter was. We're going to just place this right down into here. So it should go pretty smoothly, and that's a nice little resting spot. That means you don't have to disconnect these lines. You don't have to worry about repressurizing, removing any of the coolant, the air conditioning chemical, which I slip in my mind. I think it's, what is it, 134, whatever it is. The refrigerant that goes in these lines, you're not disturbing this, so that's a good thing. And you know, I've actually changed my mind about pulling this out just yet. In your truck, it may look different. Somebody, again, didn't really take the time to replace the hoses. These coolant hoses are way aftermarket. This thing is massive. It's a really thin line that goes from the bottom of the coolant bottle and over to the throttle body heater plate. Somebody replaced these, and that's fine. These will work, but they are definitely bigger, and they usually run down behind the air conditioning compressor. So because this one is laying on the top, we're just going to basically get these two screws, flathead screws from the throttle body heater plate. We're going to gently try to remove these hoses from that plate so that we can get access to this. Okay, making some good progress. I think the next thing, since it's right in front of me, we'll take the alternator out. I think it's a 13 millimeter and a 10 millimeter. There's two wires that lead to the back of this. So once you undo these are 13 millimeter. Once you undo these, these two, that will release it for the most part. Now, sometimes I have to come in from the side with a pry bar to lift this thing out of there. It is wedged in pretty good. And there's a little technique to when we go to put this back together. I'll show you how to get it back in, but it's usually goes right in and out without a problem. It just needs a little bit of leverage. All right, next, I think again, let's just stick with what's right in front of us and tackle these front brackets. These are the carriers that hold the things in that we just took out, the alternator, air conditioning unit over here. And they're held on by a series of 13 and 15 and 10 millimeter bolts, and not terrible to get these things off. Just a few things you've got to get down in here. So you can see they're sort of buried down in. And these are 13 millimeters, and this is a 13 millimeter here. So I think in order to get this carrier off, you have to remove this pulley right here, this whole thing. So you just move this part, and this is all one unit right here. And then that'll allow you to get this off. There's a few grounds, and like basically these hold, like I think that should have been attached maybe. Oh yeah, it's broken, but no big deal. There's a coolant line that goes from the heater core down into this area here. So we'll have to, I think we need to disconnect that. And yeah, we'll get to it. So these are 10 millimeters here and here. This is a ground strap, real important. And this just holds the coolant line in place, which goes down there. And again, that'll need to be removed just because we need to get access to these, the heads, obviously. And what's staring me in the eye, the part I really don't like the most on this job is this right here. These secondary air injection valves, these go down in here, and they're just hard to get out. I don't look forward to the job. Oh, while we're at it, we should maybe start hitting some things with some penetrating fluid. So specifically, I'm looking at the manifold bolts right here. These are 12-point bolts. Start hitting these. You know, this will take me a couple of days just because I don't have a lot of time to work on them, but hit these with some penetrating fluid and let them sit. There's 12 of them, and try to find all 12 if you can. They typically do come out pretty good, but I like to get them going anyway with the fluid, because it just, you know, I feel like it makes the job that much easier, and you don't want to break one of those off, that's for sure. What I like to do when I remove anything like this is I really try to keep the bolts with it. So when I take this out, these bolts that I loosened up, I'm gonna just leave them sit right in there. This one. This one was at the bottom here, and this one was at the top. Then we have these two 10 millimeters. One came from that ground. That's this one. Has looks like some blue Loctite on it. Good idea. But what I'll do is when we put this back together, I'm going to clean this up so it is shiny. Same thing with the back side of that. And then that connection down here, this ground strap itself, make sure that's real clean, perfect. I'll even put some dielectric grease on it to prevent it from corroding. I'll put the blue Loctite back on it. But in the meantime, just so I don't lose the thing and don't remember where it goes later, I'll put this back in. And then this held that coolant pipe in as well, so I'm going to put that back on, and pretty sure that was the right one. Anyway, I'll figure it out. It'll either be this one or this one. I can't remember where it came from. It looks like it's this one. So that's just the top tip for you. Hopefully that helps you when you go to put things back together. Yeah, we're definitely getting down into the depths of the engine. We're going to really now focus on removing this carrier that holds the air conditioning compressor and then also the power steering pump. Again, I think this needs to come off. So we have it loose already. There's like a 10 millimeter here. There's a couple of bolts behind here that's a little hard to see, but I don't remember if they come out or not. So again, we'll just remove this pulley. Okay, we're going to zoom back in on this. It's been a while since I've done this, so I've forgotten. But what does have to happen is that pulley that was on there that we loosened earlier in the video does need to come off. And then I've forgotten, this is the power steering pump. And there are a few bolts that need to stay in and one that needs to come out. And I've forgotten about that. So this one, I think these ones can go back in. I may be completely off base here, but I think these actually hold the power steering pump to this base. So I'm going to put them back in. These are 10 millimeters, but I don't think they needed to come out. What did need to come out is this top one, because there's a post, if I now remember, that comes off. So there's these three 13 millimeter, 1, 2, 3, and then a 10 millimeter at the top. Note that sometimes I've taken these apart and this is not here. So just so you know, this may not be there, so you may not need to remove it because it won't be present. But anyway, you've got these three 13 millimeters, 1, 2, 3, and then this is a 13 millimeter, but it's on a nut and it's on a post. So if I'm right, this whole thing should slide off towards the front of the vehicle on this post, and there we go. So now it's attached to the power steering pump, so I need to find a place for this to live, and I'm gonna have to put the camera down to do that. Yeah, and now it's all coming back to me. So basically I slid the power steering pump off and its housing, and I think it's okay for it to just stay right here. We have that cardboard here so that it's not going to ding anything. I'm not trying to put any undue pressure onto it. Once this is really down and out of the way, we can get to the heads here and start the rest of this job without this being in the way. So I think we're making some progress here, and everything looks, you know, kind of like I'd expect it to look. This is 140, 50,000 mile truck. I don't know if this job's ever been done. So if it has, I don't know if we're going to be able to tell, but I suspect we have a head gasket issue just based on the things we talked about in the beginning of the video. So we're going to start taking some more things now at the top of the engine. This plenum, the upper air intake comes off. It's actually pretty easily. Need 10 millimeter bolts, and then you really just have to be careful to disconnect the various little coolant lines and vacuum lines. So here again is a vacuum line, and just tuck anything out of the way that you can as gently as possible. So I think this is the idle air control valve. That'll need to be disconnected, and any of the little bits here on the top and the sides, go over to the other side, disconnect really anything that connects to the secondary air injection. All these little plugs right here need to come undone, again, gently, because they're plastic and they might be original, so they could be old. If you can reuse them, great. If not, well, you'll know, because they'll break pretty quick. So I'll put the camera up and we'll do some time lapse on it. I just wanted to pause a moment and show you these. If you're not familiar with taking these apart, these are really simple clips, but if you didn't know what to do, you'd be a little confused at first. So you can see I'm kind of angling this right back towards the camera. This little metal wire here, you don't pull this out, you actually press it in. So you use a screwdriver to press it in. And once you do, you can see there that it allows the clip to be released. So you push in with a screwdriver, or if you can do it with your thumb, it's a little hard sometimes. I usually use a screwdriver and then my other hand to then just pull that right off the connector. So there's a few of them that are like this, the idle air control valve. There's a lot of connectors on here that do the same thing. So you just push that metal piece in and away you go. When I didn't know any better, I actually would always pull these out completely. And that works too, but then you got to push it back in and sometimes you run the risk of breaking something. So just a little tip. Okay, so somebody definitely had the upper intake off on this vehicle. I can tell because right here where this secondary air injection, this valve is located, see how it's loose and it's pulling away from these areas? Normally you'd have to remove 2 nuts or 2 screws, maybe, I'm not sure which, probably screws I guess at this point, that hold this valve back on towards the top of the intake. So those are already, the job's already done for us, but then again, proof that somebody put this back together and really didn't do a good job at that. So the other thing I noticed is that unfortunately this little hose here is broken. Normally you push in at the top here, there's a little green, I think it's a green color, and you push in here and then this will pull off. But it looks like somebody, I think you can see that, they broke it. Again, just probably not knowing how to take these things apart, and I'm not quite sure. We may have to undo this clamp here, this metal part, and pull it apart that way. That's way more inconvenient, but it looks like that's what we're gonna have to do. Okay, that was, you know, a little more difficult than normal, only because this thing had been broken. So this will be a replacement part. We'll have to get this. This is an important part of the vacuum system, and admittedly I cannot remember what this guy is right here, but it's time for a replacement. We'll have to trace this back, find out where it connects to. You know, it just won't, once you push it in here, it's supposed to click and stay, and then you press that button at the top and it's really just broken. So unfortunately that'll have to be replaced. So we've gotten most of the things disconnected from here. There's a couple of plugs, a couple of hoses. I always remove this one because it's easier to get to this. Whoops, sorry, let me repeat that. I always remove this hose from here because you can't really get to this 10mm bolt on the top of the plenum. Otherwise it's a little more difficult. So once you get all the little bits and pieces disconnected from here, the top of the intake should be free from this side. Now we're going to move to this side, and over here we have the heater core hoses, the inlet and the outlet, and these just need to be pinched right here. Slide the clamps back and then disconnect them from here. Now this one, again, the work that was done on this is not great, so I'm not sure what all this muck is here, but I hope it's not a hole in the line that they were trying to fix. I don't know what that is, but usually this right here is bolted down so that these hoses are like kind of locked together. So it's a 10mm, you'll have to undo that and then it should be free. This one, again, somebody had already done that. And then again, the same problem on this side is that this secondary air injection valve block is already disconnected from the top. So there are 2 bolts in there that you'd normally have to disconnect to do that, to remove this, the whole plenum from it. So hopefully this helps with that. And then I think, again, these are some aftermarket pipes. So just for clearance sake, we may have to remove this as well. I can't remember if that has to come out or not, but there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there's 4 at the top here, 4 10 millimeters, and then there's one deep down in here and one deep down in the back. 10 millimeter with an extension, we'll get those off. So we'll put that. All right, we're back to working on the top of the upper intake, and what you can see is I disconnected the hoses from the inside of the heater core. This goes to and from the heater core, and is connected into these pipes here. Disconnected those just to give us a little bit more room to work. Whenever this comes out, just having this kind of loose is good. Here's another idea, is that this pipe that runs down here has a 10 millimeter there. And so the best way to do that is to come in through here. That makes sense, right? Move this wire out of the way. There we go. And usually you can get your 10 millimeter down here just perfectly. And then boom, that'll come right off with a little twist. In this case, I'm comfortable using the drill. Just go real slow. All right, don't lose that. And get that out of there, and we're gonna save that. We're gonna put that right back into where it came out. And then this looks like somebody had sealed it up with some RTV, so you may have to get a screwdriver in right in there and kind of wiggle that loose. And with the new rebuild kit, it includes a new gasket. Wow, this one's really in there. Like I said, somebody just went to town with the RTV. So this is a two-hand job. I'll have to take this down. But before I do that, and again, this will come out of here. This whole thing will come out without this being removed. It's got to come out at some point. So we're going to work on that at a point later on down the road. Here's the other things we're doing. We removed 1, 2, 3, and 4. We've got these loose. There's a 5th one here, which is down below. So you'll come in from the top to get that one. And then the same thing way back here. You get your extension and you go right down in here and you'll feel it. It's actually just straight there. It's actually not real bad to find. Just move this plastic pipe out of the way and you'll be able to get right to it with your extension. All right, now that we've got these all loose, we can literally lift this thing straight up and then towards you. So make it easier is if you can pull these bolts out, that way they don't catch on the threads when you're trying to pull it out. So remove those as best you can, including that back one if you can get to it. I usually use a little magnet and pull that out. That way it's a little easier in getting it out of there. So we're gonna do that here next. And I'm sorry I forgot to mention that if this is the first time it's ever come apart, the back of this here, you can see, let's see if I can point to it with the screwdriver. Okay, so this right here and this one right here, those usually have screws in them that attach the coil pack. So sorry, this little wire's in the way, but those go through here and into this area back here. So I forgot to tell you about that, because if you go to take yours apart and that's still attached, you cannot get the top of this air intake system out unless that's disconnected. So those are 2 additional 10 millimeter bolts that you need to take out of there. You want to be real careful then to get them out. You don't want to drop them down here because, well, we're taking it all apart anyway, but still you just don't want to have that hassle. So now that we've got this loose, we're going to pull the upper intake off and out. Okay, we got basically the front of the engine off and the very tippy top. And after this, we're going to start tackling the fuel rail, which is these 2 things right here, and then the fuel injectors, which are the green ones. There's one for each cylinder, so there's 8 of them, and basically they just need to be unplugged and set aside. There's a couple of I think 4 10mm that need to come off to get the fuel rail out of there. But now that I actually think about it, that fuel rail, I believe it can stay in. Anyway, we'll find out. We'll go along the way here. If we have to remove it completely, we will. I can't remember if it comes out when this lower intake comes off or not, if it comes off in one piece, but regardless, we're gonna figure it out. Okay, I think I'm gonna make this the end of part 1. And I did the best I could. I had another cover on top of the intake here. It didn't do a great job, but I'm sure there's no water down in here. I'm draining the oil. The engine's gonna be completely apart. So if any water got in from my power washing ventures here, it will be out. I'm not concerned about it. But what we did was basically, it was getting such, there was an inch of caked up oil on the front of the engine, all in these pans. You can still see some remaining just gunked up old oil from leaks from the last 20 years. So I decided to hit it with the power washer. I didn't go over it exhaustively, but just enough to get off some of the really the heaviest bits of it. So I'm gonna let this dry overnight. What I'm gonna do is put the bonnet, the hood back on just gently. I'll probably actually let it latch in place, just, you know, the first latch, the safety latch. And that way it doesn't blow away if we get any storms. We've lost the sun for today, but a little cloudy. It's still been great to work outside. This has been perfect temperature day, no humidity. It's been very pleasant to do the job. So this will be the end of part 1. We'll get into the rest of the top end here in parts 2 and then back together on part 3 or so. Thanks for tuning in.